Okay, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our first early afternoon, late morning session. And since I managed to fix my Zoom screen sharing, I'd like to start by showing you the few slides that I wanted to start with at the opening of the conference. Just very briefly outline the the things that I've talked about before. Is it sharing? No, again.
Yes.
Yes, okay. It's sharing now. All right. So, so the conference is entitled Visions of the Afterlife, and we prepared a poster to advertise the meetings. Of course, my own personal influences, inspirations was the research into the rise and fall of the afterlife. Here, I just wanted to show some of the books that inspired me a long time ago. So, from Orphic Mysteries with the rituals that promised the knowledge of the afterworld through saints like Perpetua, who dreamt of a ladder to heaven, and of the glorious afterlife, we do go to the torments of hell. But notice that at the very beginning, we do have only this division into heaven and hell. There is no in-between place. The in-between place is created in the later Middle Ages. And of course, here, almost immediately, literature begins to describe the place called purgatory, as Bremer notices. Then the roots of the name purgatorium, which appears sometime after 1170, is this differentiation between a purifying fire and the fire of the last judgment. And of course, then when you think about the kind of elaborate description of purgatory, I can't not mention Dante and his travel to the seven layers of purgatory, and through the kind of narrow corridors. The trip itself is purgatorial, one may say. Here, afterlife as interrogation. Of course, the inspiration was, on the one hand, J.M. Coetzee Elizabeth Costello, and the final chapter of that novel, At the Gate, which, by the way, was, as a first version, was entitled The Statement, and it has more than 10 versions in the archives that I was working at recently. And Claire Kilroy, The Devil I Know, one of the really most interesting novels written in English, Irish novels in English, published originally in, I think, 2012. The inspirations, of course, from Irish literature are quite clear. The last person that I mentioned was William Butler Yeats, No Plays, and the fact that he used the ghostly emanations of Irish heroes in his plays that are very clearly inspired by the Japanese theater. Here's Brenda Maddox, of course, George's Ghost. He was very much into the kind of occult that was something of a fashion at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. And this was supposed to be my introduction. And now let me introduce more properly our guest. I have to do it again, sorry. Yes, this one. And I was really, really very, very happy to be able to invite Claire Kilroy to talk to us today. And I've started with this postcard. I know that you've sent us the official photo, and I have it on my next slide. But this was the photo that actually made me research your work. I got a couple of these postcards from the Irish Embassy. And although I knew most of the writers at the time, which was a couple of years ago, I didn't know your work. So, of course, when I had pictures of Toy Bean and Sebastian Barry, John Banville, I decided I need to know who this person is. And I like the black and white feel of these photographs. And of course, I started by reading, surprisingly, The Devil I Know. This was my first novel, because this was also a novel which the students selected for my previous MA seminar. For some reason, they found it and they thought, oh, that's interesting. It's so different from what they knew, from what they read about Irish literature. And so this is how this journey began, with this one a postcard. Biography, just to let you know a little bit more about our guest. Claire attended Trinity College in Dublin studying English, then worked as the assistant editor on the BBC television drama Ballykisenjo. Started writing the first draft of her novel all summer, and then returned to Trinity College to earn her MPhil in creative writing. She also won the Rooney Prize for Irish Literature in 2004 and has been shortlisted many times for the Kerry Group Irish Novel of the Year and the Irish Book Awards. And she lives in Dublin. So here's live from Dublin, Claire Kilroy, for you. Influences, yes, John Banville and Vladimir Nabokov. Perhaps we'll be able to talk a little bit more about your influences, the novelists that inspire you. Martin Amis, Andrew O'Hagan, Michael Frayn, and I do have a question about Michael Frayn and Headlong. This is the story with Peter Bruegel's picture in the background. And all-time favorite novel, John Banville's Athena. Perhaps that has already changed, but you might have another novelist that you admire, but this is what was listed in your biography. And here are the four novels, including The Devil I Know, that really contributed to the recognition of the writer in the national, and I have to say international arena as well, because The Devil I Know is the novel that has been talked about and reviewed a number of times. And of course, once you have that kind of a novel, you go back to your previous works. And Tenderwire, for example, from 2006, will be the subject matter of a Lovelet Club, a student club, a discussion December 20th. So right after our meeting, we will talk about this particular novel. And I like that. Oh, okay, I'll come back to that because of the New York context and of course the Vivaldi and everything else. The recognition for the newest novel, and believe me, I was stopped by a friend of mine who teaches practical English at our university, and she immediately recognized your name and the new novel that was published, because this is the Times Novel of the Year, Soldier Sailor. The as you can see from all of these reviews, they're not simply blurbs, but they really tell you something about the importance, recognition, and the depth of that new novel that has just appeared this year. It will be published in the paperback version in 2024. And I kind of like that picture with the dog. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your canine friend. But sorry, my mouse doesn't really want to cooperate. But before we talk about your novels in a little bit more details. This is also what we prepared as always to advertise your work. So this is the meeting is also part of the series, which is called Poznań Reading Series. And should the weather be nicer and perhaps finances a little bit better, then we would be able to invite you in person, but we never know, perhaps in the future. So now, without further ado, I'll stop sharing my screen. Let us start by, of course, dear members of the audience, you are all welcome to ask questions. Chat would be great because then we can be prepared, and also Claire can see your questions later on. But let me just get you into the atmosphere of this discussion. So you have published 5 novels now. Every one of them is distinctively different from the others. How do you come up with ideas?
I don't think I do. I think I just write and write and write and write until within this big body of words I know where to start. But it's feelings. It's not an idea. It's a feeling. The novel I'm writing now, I wanted to write. Funnily enough, I wanted to write about ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it changes as you explore this, and the way I'm sorry, I'm talking about something that it hasn't been finished or barely started, but it started with ghosts. So I wanted it to be historical about the Irish struggle for independence. So I read Yeats talking about ghosts in Howth because I'm from this village, Howth, which Devil on Hill is set in. Then when I read Yeats, I was like, Yeats is your narrator because it was Yeats as a teenage boy. So that's how you find your way in obliquely. I do. Some people have a flashing idea. I never have had a flashing idea in my life. So I have to find my way inside just a sort of a suspicion, the things the things I feel in my life become a novel in a very different way, but they still start from my emotions and feelings. And you tell a story that is often about someone else's emotions and feelings. The last book, Soldier Sailor, about motherhood, that's very direct, but none of the others are.
So students of literature will probably want to ask you the question whether you always knew that you wanted to be a writer. That's something that I know comes from your inner convictions. How do you know? And when do you know? Basically, this is what you want to do. This is what you want to devote your life to.
I was always writing. Like, I remember, I would say I wrote my first story. Like, I went to see Superman in the 70s and I came home and wrote out the whole plot. And I wrote a ghost story after that. So I think the arts of any type, but the question is, can you make it happen? Can you, it's not a job, it's not a position you apply for. It's you have to invent the road, and that's where it gets tricky. And it gets logistical, it's financial. How do you finance this? It's and I'm not sure that I think if you are that way, you have to write. And for speaking specifically about writing, I know when I had a child and childcare is very expensive in Ireland, and I had my child in 2012 during the bust. And it was a very precarious time, and childcare was too expensive for a writer, so I had to mind my child. I love minding my child, but it was cheaper for me to mind him than a crash. But I know I wasn't right myself because I had no time to write. So it's a need. It's a human need for, for me, I need to do that. If you're a painter, you need to paint. It's people need to do certain things to be themselves. So I really understood it when I couldn't do it anymore and became very lost in who I was.
That's that's certainly very interesting. Of how you find your future, I don't want to say a career. It's not a career, it's a calling more than a
It is
career.
a, yeah, yes, yeah.
But you find it in different ways, and you find it when you most miss it. So yes. So perhaps I'm going to start as a builder the next year, and then when I'll come back working on construction sites, I'm sure I will be sure that this is what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. You attended Trinity College, Dublin, and of course, this is one of the most prestigious schools in the world. How did the classes, again, this is for the benefits of our students who are here in the audience, did these classes influence your writing? How was this whole university experience that you left and then you returned to, how did that influence your writing?
The degree in English, I started at age 17, just turned 18. That was 4 years of heavy reading, from going from Old English up to contemporary literature. That was more about, I think it's absolutely essential. You need to be a reader before you're a writer. So that was about reading all the people who had written before you and having some knowledge and understanding of the broad, like I saw Dante there come up during your and you know, just to know where that fits is very important as part of the tradition. In Ireland we have a strong Irish literary tradition, which was actually not the largest part of the degree, but it was part of the degree. But the Irish literary tradition is that starts with school kids. Like we learned as kids. I remember the centenary of James Joyce's birth was in 1982 was the centenary of his birth. And I remember that. I remember being a little kid and we were told about this great man who was Irish. And Ireland was poor and horrible in 1982. So it was a sort of pride and dignity for us. So Trinity itself, I loved, you know, because all we did was read and write about the stuff. And it was so important because I'd come through this, Ireland was still in recession and we all were going to emigrate, and it was only a question of when, and we were not going to emigrate to be writers. You know, like I worked in a BMW car factory in Germany. You know, that's where we were going. We were not meant to be artists. We were meant to work as the either American workforce or the European workforce. So for 4 years being in Trinity, just reading the literary canon was the most amazing freedom. And I was thrilled. I was scared for when I got out, because then I'd have to go and work in a car factory or, you know, whatever. But for those 4 years, I felt safe and excited, very excited. Trinity is cool. That's the other thing. It was just a cool place full of cool people. They weren't just Irish. There were a lot of British. There were not a lot of Americans, some Americans, not a huge amount of Europeans, in certainly the BA, the age 18 to 21 or 22. But they were interesting people. So it kind of supercharged me that this is, yes, your life. And then when I came out in 95, the recession was ending. So that's when I got a job in TV, Ballycus Angel. And that was when I realized I might be able to live in Ireland, which back then was unusual for someone my age. We emigrated. So did it influence my writing? Yes, more so now. Like, as I say, I mentioned Yeats there. I have all this, you know, I have my resources that I learned back then. And your brain is much more fluid when you're young and you're able to take in all these books and have a resonance with some. That's the other thing. You learn what you resonate with. You learn, like, I'm never going to love Dryden. So I read him. I know, you know, that's that, but that's not who I am. So you kind of find your touchstones within that. But to be able to work on top of the literary tradition, you need to know your literary tradition. And then when I went back to do the masters, that was the workshop thing, which is where you write whatever you want and they respond to you. No one tells you how to write. I was taught by poets, and I'm writing a novel, so and they don't tell you what to do. You do it, and they comment, and your class comment. So that was, I find the workshop process very helpful. I find it very helpful then, and I teach students now through the workshop process. I don't stand up and go, right, you need a plot, you need a character, you need this. They write, I respond, and then we all respond.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But you mentioned one thing, which was the literary canon, and I really thank you for that, because my first year students are struggling with this history of literature in English from Beowulf to contemporary times. And of course, one of the things that we test them on is you need to be able to kind of place works within a whole continuum of literary traditions. And I'm sure that most of them think that, why, God, you have Wikipedia, we can check it almost immediately. No, you need to have it processed in your brain. That's how, that's what knowledge is. This is knowledge, is not information, as we know. All right, going back to the second aspect of the beginning of your literary life, which you've mentioned, the TV editing. And so how does this process and working with the TV, did it help you in any way to think about your own writing?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Because editing, there's a shooting script which the writer writes, and the director goes off and films it, and then it comes into the edit suite. And there used to be, I think, 60 scenes, and then the editors start, and it never starts on scene 1. It starts, say, scene 10, then goes to scene 3, 4, 5, then goes to scene 12. And that fluidity of making the beginning is never the beginning. You can start somewhere else and then move back to the beginning if you need to. It was that freedom of moving stuff around on the screen that I learned from writing. Remember, I said I just keep. You ask me what idea, how do you get your ideas? And I just keep writing until I have an idea. I keep speculatively writing. But then when I do have the ideas, I'm able to go, there's my starting point, and start picking the book out from all these notes. And there'll always be over 100,000 words of notes. I just call it notes. I've a file on my computer now called Note 6, which is this novel about Yeats and ghosts and fairies and nationalism. So, and I don't know where my starting point is. I just keep going. There's about 50,000 words in Note 6. So I'll probably keep going till there's 100,000 before I know, right, there's a beginning.
Oh, I want that novel. I want Yeats and Ghosts. I really want to read it. So, yes, okay. A final, a more general question, which is about genres, because of course your novels, well, the blurbs identify them somehow, and of course we have expectations as to what the novel is going to be all about. I keep telling the students that once, mistakenly, because everybody was talking about it, bought the Christian Grey novels, and then Amazon was writing to me like every other day with all the pornographic novels in the world. Liliana, based on your recent purchases, we thought that you might be. So genre is yes, it's good for the sellers because they think that they can sell you more in the same written in the same style, but perhaps that's not exactly what you thought, because your novels seem to start as something and then they just throw this whole idea of genre out of the window. So do you plan or doing that, or just the novels in a way write themselves, and you follow where they take you, because the writing does take us in different places that we initially thought they would take us. So how does it work? Do you think about genres consciously or not really?
Yeah, I don't read I don't want to sound like a snob, but I don't read genre fiction. I have read some genre. I've read a few thrillers. I don't get on with them because the ending always has to be small and make sense. And that's not what literary fiction does. So whereas I have always liked the discipline of a good plot, Not there's no plot in my last novel, Soldier Sailor. It's just about keeping a child alive. The other novels, the structure of a plot facilitates the stuff I want to write about, which is mood, feeling, emotions. So if you have that skeleton, you can build upon it. So I do like using plot structure, and I'm returning to it with my Yeats novel. But genre is a way of selling a book, and my publisher was very keen to market my work as literary thrillers. But if people who like thrillers read my books, they're disappointed. So it doesn't really work because they're still not thrillers. So particularly with Tenderwire, which has they wanted to kind of almost market that as a crime novel, and it's not. So that was my second novel, and my third novel was a rebellion against that, because I made it about a creative writing group, and there's no but that's the you cannot market that as a thriller.
No, you
writing.
But you do have quite a number of really interesting references here. Okay, so now let's talk about one novel at a time. Let's start with All Summer, and one of the and language, because of course our students, for them, English is a second language. And just imagine that you graduate from a Polish high school, you get into the university, and everything is in English. We don't really have classes, and of course all the classes in English are obligatory. So and suddenly they're lost that this is not a high school advanced English, but then you have to start reading texts and then discuss them through certain methodologies. So language is important to them because they still need to check items, words, expressions, etc. So All Summer does have that feeling that of the spoken language, at least at some point, when the language is heard and processed by the listener, and Anna is consciously kind of repeating the words and phrases. So words. Child's play transformed into an adult game in this novel. How important was this game with words for the development of the character?
Well, you cited, or I originally would have cited, Nabokov and Banville, and they're all about words and playing with words and hiding things, concealing things. Like Lolita, for those who haven't read it, the fate of Lolita is on the first page, but you don't know it until you finish it. And I loved that chess play that you can do with language, as well as the striving to capture difficult to describe emotions. That is the challenge, and that's the true part of the novel. But there's also play in a novel, fun. And back to Nabokov, he was a chess player, and he wrote his books like a game of chess, where he would give you this amount of information and the reader would respond in their heads with, oh, that's what's going on. But Nabokov would make another move and throw the reader and confuse them. So that play, I mean, I would have read those books very young. Not very young. I mean, I think 16 when I read Lolita. Also, Joyce is just all. I wouldn't describe Joyce as fun.
Yeah, I do have a question about Joyce, so I'll come back to that.
All right.
Yeah. Anyway, for those who haven't read the novel, when you start reading it, it's a story of a woman who suddenly, at the beginning, finds herself on an island, and we know that she is running away from something, from someone. We don't know what is happening and why. And now rereading this, the beginning of the novel, it kind of made me think not really about Nabokov, whom I read many years ago, and I remember the basic outline of the novel, but I wouldn't list it as one of the intertexts. But it made me think of Pinter, Harold Pinter's Theater of Menace, that from the very beginning that something is not right, that something is off, that there is some unspecified danger that this woman might be escaping from, or perhaps she's the creator of the danger. But how did you come up with this? But this is your debut novel, so here it is, a young writer on the literary scene, writing the story of a woman who, in the end, we find out steals something. Again, there's a picture, a painting in the background of the story. But did you think about this idea of danger, of menace for Anna Hunt?
Yeah, actually, what if I go back to writing that, I was say, I think I was 25 when I started it, and I didn't know where my life was going. And that wasn't a nice feeling. Especially, I'll go back to being Irish, and we had to emigrate, and we didn't know where we'd wash up. We were just drifting, and there was very little security for us. So that book, Anna has lost her memory, and that was the key thing for me, is to write about someone who doesn't know who she is or what's going to happen to her. Remember, I said it's about writing emotions. I wanted to write about when I was out of college and I didn't know what would happen to me, and was scared. So that book, that's where I was. My head was to write about danger and fear and confusion. Now, to tell that story, we then go into a plot with a structure, and there's a stolen painting which has a face, and the face is she, because Anna doesn't needs to know her own face. She needs to know who she is by finding the painting which has a face. So that's I suppose an example of how I used a thriller form to tell a story about being lost, and young and worried, and kind of at sea, but also hopeful that this can work out and you may find your soulmate, stuff like that.
Or that you may find your soul, even if you don't find your soulmate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and by the end of it, she's a lot clearer on her own story, and so was I, but I had to write it to find
Yes, when we look at these two novels, so this is the debut novel, and then the second novel, Tenderwire, I kind of saw these two female protagonists as inversions of one another, where Anna is more vulnerable and weak and not knowing where she's going. Eva Tyne kind of plunges, and I want to quote from Frayne, headlong into what she wants and what she thinks she wants. But, there are also these moments of menace, moments of not knowing what to do. But definitely, she's definitely a much stronger personality than Anna Hunt. Are my feelings right, or am I misreading the
I hadn't thought about that, but your feelings are right. They are both. That I think of those two as the young women novels. They're still, because I was a young woman writing them, and yes, the Tenderwire was written. I started it, I think, at 29 and finished it at 32. So we're still comparatively young woman, still finding her way, but far more aggressively and clearer in terms of my way is art. So in the first all summer, she's chasing a painting because she thinks art will save her. In Tenderwire, she's chasing a violin, another form of art, music. So it's still that conviction that the path, if you follow art, you will find your path, told as a story.
Yes. Yes, you find your path if you follow art. So did you research the Stradivari? For those who don't know the plot, yes, the stories of a young woman. This young woman is Irish, but she is currently in New York. And this is where she I don't know, I mean, she goes into a pub in the middle of the night. Oh my God, yeah, that would be very dangerous in New York. Anyway, she meets some shady character who at the beginning she thinks is Russian, but he's probably Chechen, or anyway, Eastern mafia of some sort, and decides to buy and just chases the money because she decides to buy the Stradivari from him. So what about the Stradivari? Why the symbol? Why the violin? And why music? Because it's a different, yeah, it's not painting, it's a different form of art, and yet an artist again.
Part of it was I did meet a man in a dive bar in New York who stole violins that he imported, and he said he was Russian, and he imported violins and said they were masterpiece violins, and they weren't. When I finished All Summer to celebrate, having actually in '94 during college years, I'd gone to work in New York, and now I was coming back to New York as a tourist, which was a much nicer experience. But he kind of gave me the beginning of that novel, and I went with it from there. But it was about authenticity. Is the violin authentic? Is there something very real about proper art? And that's the journey that Eva is on, that if something is real, it will resonate at a certain frequency that will make sense, and it does to her. And I suppose that is the writer's path, the artist, that's all of our paths, trying to chase down this elusive, in this case, artifact of a violin. With a writer, it's just trying to put words together to turn it into something that resonates. It's just such a strange quest. So they're quest novels about the arts. The first three are about art. You know, All Summer is a painting, Tenderwire is a violin, All Names Have Been Changed is about writing as a thing that will reveal your path in life.
Eva does think that she will play better having this dream violin, and it's true that we think that if I think that if I play the Steinway, which is 800,000 zlotys, I'm so much better than on my old piano. It's of course not true, but there is this feeling in her, and I particularly like the scene when she has the Magdalena Stradivarius and she's playing a big concert in Germany, and then all she wants to see is her father because she thinks that he's still alive, and so she chases her own identity, but she is also chasing this father who disappeared, and I thought that at the end perhaps the father will resurface, but that would be too romantic for it to happen. But anyway, so music is a big part, and she music is not, but music, classical music, being also the kind of structural basis for the whole story. And I've mentioned Vivaldi, so the novel gets a very a strict division into the 4 seasons with the Vivaldi, with the quotations, and we know that this is within the year her story is going to be resolved somehow. How is Eva able, for you? How is she able to deal with this a trauma of losing a father through her music? Were you thinking about this particular aspect of literature that will give you hope once you devote yourself to something else rather than just play? Because she doesn't just play; she is a virtuoso. She's an artist. And is that what saves her in the end also? But she's also quite shrewd, you know, and transporting the Stradivarius and knowing what she wants to do and how to deal with the mafia and the money and everything else. So, but she loses everything is as if she chooses. This is a kind of Faustian scene. She loses everything for the music. So is she redeemed at the end through music, or
I would say saved by it, which would be my conviction that art can save you. I mean, we saw that during COVID. People started tuning into the artists. I don't know how it was in Poland, but the artists really came to the fore in Ireland. But I still, the lesson it's personal. I am saved by art and always have been. And so Eva, my protagonists are also similarly saved by art as something, it's a guiding light for them. So, I mean, even researching this novel and sitting there with Yeats' poetry makes me feel better. It just does. And I never thought I'd be sitting here rereading collected poems. I'm just doing the poetry at the moment, collected poetry, but realizing the effect it has on my mood and feeling connected to something that I find hard to describe. And I was reading, there was one poem, and of course it's taught differently. And then I'm coming back as, you know, a 50-year-old woman reading it differently. When I was in school, it was all about his big romance with Maud Gonne and Irish nationalism. And now I'm reading it as just a man, you know, just a man making sense of his life. And there was a poem called To a Friend Whose Work Has Come to Nothing. And I just read it there, and it's an acknowledgement. All your work has come to nothing. I think it's about Hugh Lane. That's just from Googling it. Who was a man, a friend of Yeats. All his life's work came to nothing, and Yeats wrote this poem and described this man as a string on an instrument that mad fingers play upon, and said, "Be secret and exult." And that just made me feel better. I don't know why, that you can retreat to the self. Everything's gone wrong, but you can retreat to who you are, be secret and exult. You know, it's a real safety net for a human being.
And so, yeah, so it might be a safety network for the protagonist of All the Nights That Doesn't Change. But here, as well as in The Devil I Know, we do not have the female protagonists as speakers, but we do have a young man who, yes, goes back to the university, gets into this creative writing workshop, and simply begins to participate in that workshop, of course, trying to write his own novel. He's very unsuccessful, by the way, in the novel. But before I'll ask you a more specific question concerning this text, this is a moment when we go back to Ulysses, because you said that you've written Ulysses during COVID, and of course this novel, although appeared many years later, is replete with allusions to Joyce and Beckett. My favorite quotation will be the one when somebody from the group is really angry. So who are you, Joyce, that you can write your dialogues without question marks and invented the commas, and it's just such a funny way of oh yes, this is how the Joyces, Stanislaus did the same thing. This is how they were writing. So anyway, so do Irish writers consciously or unconsciously respond to Joyce and Beckett, and this is inevitable in all your writing, or you just thought that this was part of your Trinity College course, and you wanted to use it in a novel?
Well, like Rolling Stones or Beatles. You know, actually, I don't have this conversation with the only man I can think of who has cited that he's more Beckett than Joyce is John Bangle has said it. But we're all influenced almost by definition, because there's no escape. You know, if you're an Irish kid and you go to school, you're going to learn your Heaney, your Yeats, you will learn a bit of Dubliners. Beckett was not, I don't know if Beckett's on now. Beckett was not there in my day, but it's very in the Irish psyche to learn these writers. And actually, this is going back to having had a run at the canon in my teenage years. And now here I am, many years later, dipping into it for sustenance. You it doesn't have to be Joyce or Beckett. It can be
Mm-hmm.
Joyce at certain times or Beckett at certain times. I certainly lean towards Joyce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And have found more solace in Joyce. Though, as a writer, one of the Beckett plays I have returned to a lot is Crap's Last Tape,
Mm-hmm.
which is about the sacrifices you make in youth to be an artist, and they may be wrong. You may have made a grave error if you've sacrificed love to be an artist. So, Joyce is a far more emotional writer, and that's why I tune into him more
Mm-hmm.
than Beckett. But a play like Crap's Last Tape is an emotional play, so that resonates with me.
Mm-hmm. It's also a play about memory and about aging, and so yes, we all come back to it at some point. But why did you change the voice? Why did you choose a male protagonist for this?
Freedom, just freedom, artistic freedom. If I was still looking at male behavior that as a young woman I'd been confounded by, like, why do men behave this way? Why do they suddenly stop talking to you? So I wrote from the other side of the mirror, but it
Mm-hmm.
gave me a lot more freedom because I could not be confused with my protagonist in the way that um like my father would go, you know, when you stole the violin in Tenderwire, and I would go, Dad, I didn't steal the violin. The character, and he'd go, oh yeah, okay, but you know when you said the bit about, and I go, no, Dad, I
Mm-hmm.
did not say that. It's a you know. So I felt I'm getting trapped, and if I really
Mm-hmm.
want to write with freedom, there can be no confusion between me. So a young woman writing young women gets
Mm-hmm.
confused with the young woman. Whereas if I switch gender, there's far less scope
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for me to be confused, and therefore far more freedom for me to write.
So I guess this novel, The Devil I Know, is also about artistic freedom because this is the second one that is also set from the voice is that of a male, and
Actually,
it's really wonderfully designed. Again, I really do admire the designs of the novels, the kind of ways in which you get into them, but the way in which they're structured. So here are a couple of days of evidence. We don't know until the very end that it might be some sort of purgatorial questioning. So afterlife is interrogation, as I said before. And it kind of begins as if he was giving a deposition in some sort of court, since we have the first day of evidence, and this is 10 March 2016. And then there is this voice of well, the person who is questioning the protagonist, please state your name for the record. And then from the very beginning of the novel, we know that the two guys, so the person who is questioning our protagonist, Tristram St. Lawrence, his name is, and the judge, however we call him, whose name is Fergus, they knew each other. And so we know that it's no longer that kind of, well, there is a degree of being formal, but it's a different kind of formality and informality in that novel. Now, this is the novel which begins and feels like a real interrogation, only to become something much less realistic and something which kind of, again, throws out of the window our convictions of what a realistic narrative is going to be. So, was it for you the way to explain the crashing of the Celtic Tiger? How did you come up with this idea of rewriting? Again, this is Faustus, but not only Faustus, in this through the formula of interrogation.
oh,
So.
I think it was, we had our crash in 2008, and it got blacker and
Mm-hmm.
scarier, and it felt. Uh, Remember, I referred to my youth, and we were in permanent recession, and it was
Mm-hmm.
Ireland was a. The joke was, with the last person to leave the country, turn out the lights. It was that dark a country. So it felt like we were being sent back to there, and you can use the word purgatory if you like, but this time we had a huge debt. Whereas back in the 80s, we had no money. Now we had minus money, which is a lot worse. And we owed, oh, I can't remember the figure, but each man, woman, and child in Ireland had a personal debt. I think it was 330,000 euro. You know, that's how big this debt was. So I am not an economist, as you might know from my writing, but there was all this business of Ireland selling its bonds on the market and to raise cash to pay this debt. And you'd hear it on the news every morning. The bonds were brought to the market. The market didn't like it. The market didn't pay enough money. Or next week it would be the market responded better to the bonds that we are trying to sell. And it was all this, the market, the market, the market. And I had no idea who the market was. In a practical term, I was like, who is this market? Where is this market? Is it in New York and London? I don't understand this business of the market. And it seemed to me that the market was this very powerful force that was not positive. It was a negative force, and it was greed and retribution. And Ireland was we were very publicly punished for the Celtic Tiger and sneered at by some other European countries for having gotten ideas about ourselves. So this force of the market was what I was trying to write about. And how do I describe this strange, all-powerful controlling our planet force? And I suppose that's where Monsieur Deauville came from. And there was one of those what do they call them? Is it when the richest countries meet to have a conference? I can't think of what it's called. The 20 richest countries are and they had one in Deauville in France. And it just Monsieur Deauville became that force. And that's how he started. He was the markets, whatever they are. And you have to pay the markets back. That notion of payback. I mean, Faust would be, we studied Marlowe and Faust back to my degree in English and the canon. I love Christopher Marlowe. I love Dr. Faustus. Great story. So yeah, that's all tied into how that came about.
Oh, okay. Hello, guys. My first year students, Marlowe and Faustus. You see how important it is? And so, yes, so the reading list are important. Thank you very much for that. My final question that perhaps the audience would like to think about their own. Yes, the new novel, Soldier Sailor, is, again, you don't like labels, but they are being given by publishers, is labeled as psychological prose. Would you agree with that? And can you tell us a little bit more about that and about that novel? I know that this is about motherhood, but yes, the psychological prose and what's the selling point of that novel?
There is no selling point. It's just the sheer nothingness of trying to raise a child, which is from the outside it looks really unchallenging and really easy. But when you are the one in charge, it's the most demanding thing I've ever done in my life, because you're tired, you don't get a break, you have no it's loss of personal freedom was a real shock to me. I suppose being a novelist who didn't have a boss or any of that, to no longer own your own time for the foreseeable future. In the end, I got a job and then I could pay for childcare. But he was 2 by then. But to no longer own your own time was such a shock, Now, I love my child, it's not that, but if all the care work is, as it is in Ireland, put on women, and all the freedom is given to the men. It doesn't work for women who've had, I didn't have a baby till 39, so I had enjoyed freedom, and to take my freedom away was so difficult. And if you look at that novel, which is actually, it's my most successful novel, but there's all the structure you're talking about in the past novels, say The Four Seasons or Dr. Faustus or any of that, that's gone. It's just describing day-to-day life, trying to raise a baby, and there is no clever structure. There's none of that. It's so is it psychological? Yes, but so is raising a baby. You know, raising a baby is like working for the UN, and you're dealing with a terrorist who is standing on the ledge, and you're trying to get the terrorist to get off the ledge, but actually you're on the ledge too, and you really want to jump. You know, and if you haven't slept properly, you stop coping. You know, so that's what that book is. Just there is no plot, there is no structure, there is no artifice. Because my imagination as a writer wasn't there anymore. Because to imagine, you need freedom. Freedom is time. So, you know, it's a completely different, it's written in a completely different register.
Yeah, freedom is time. Sorry, I have to write this down.
Well, I wanted to escape into my previous novels. You know, I wanted to set them in New York and to have baddies, and you know, the fun aspect of playing. Now, language is always a big thing. Language remains a big thing in Soldier Sailor, but it's a very stark novel compared to the others.
I'm sorry, one of my cats. Yes. I wanted to show her to you because she is entirely dark. And when we're talking about the afterlife, well, I would have had the afterlife being named as a witch with this black cat of mine and living alone.
I saw her tail.
Okay. Anyway, yes. Now, thank you very, very much for all your answers and enlightening your writing and the novels that we will talk about, I think, long after this interview is concluded. Perhaps there are some questions from the audience now. I do welcome comments. Simply, that would be great to involve the audience a little bit. Okay, do we have chat? Sorry.
Oh, gone.
Well, my chat is not showing, so you guys have to help me.
I can see. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can see it. Okay, yeah.
I have a question concerning your first novel. To what extent can we talk about? Oh, this I was not in school that day. Can we talk about some neo-modernist experimentation with the form of the text, with this interesting focus on language and the role of memory in a personal perception of reality? I don't know what neo-modernist is, but I will say that the whole memory thing became very interesting to me because just growing up in a family, we have totally different versions of what actually happened. And so I wanted to write about subjectivity, as in, this is my version, and I'm not saying it's right, but this is how I remember it. So all of the protagonists understand that what they remember and what they are telling you may not be true, even to them, because it's what the human imagination has done with the events that transpired. That's what I'm writing about. There can be no right and wrong. There's only, this is what I think happened and how I felt. And that's my story. And not allowing for other stories. Does that make sense? I'm not actually sure what, oh, there's a little.
Okay, so maybe I will just
Yes,
Yeah,
Mia,
I'm really sorry, but my camera is not working today, so I cannot show up myself here. Thank you very much for the answer.
Was that you asking about the
modernism?
neo-modernist?
Yes, it's me.
Okay, we have another.
Sorry, I don't know what neo-modernism is.
Two questions. Do you think that being a mother inevitably directs one's writing towards this topic, as it invites a lot of consideration and attempts at rationalization while one is swamped in the raising of a child?
I wanted to escape from writing about motherhood when I was a mother because I wanted to be myself again. So I would inevitably, every female writer who becomes a mother has a different experience. I did feel that nonfiction was the direction that a lot of writers have gone towards. And certainly the first thing I wrote was a short essay, nonfiction, because it was the only thing I could write. I could no longer imagine that part of me was switched off because I was tired and overwhelmed and couldn't really complete full sentences. So inevitably, no, I don't think it's inevitable. Yes, attempts at rationalization, absolutely. The story, it's written, I wrote it after my child was young, about when my child was young, those specifically preschool years, because they are just entering into the realm of chaos and coping. And that's the opposite of structuring stories. So I wrote retrospectively about like the preschool years. The child doesn't have language yet, or he may have one or two words that he shouts over and over and over. You know, so it's I needed myself to go back and make sense. So yes to rationalization, just go, what was that? That wrecked my life. I need to think about what that was and look at it as an artist, not look at it as a the nappy burst, which is what a lot of women are taught to joke about it and to pretend it's easy and to pretend they're having fun. But actually, I thought it was the most demanding period of my life. And though there was fun, there was also real confrontation of who you are and how capable and contemplation of failure, so I suppose I should have read more Beckett to help with the failure. But the other thing is you can't read when you're baby, you're just so tired. There's no point in trying to process sentences that require deep thought because it's gone. Like that freedom is gone. Freedom is a thing that comes up a lot with me. So yeah, I did not want to write about motherhood. I wanted to go back to being myself. But yes, I think for me it was inevitable to go back and look at it to try and make sense of it because I fixed my life through writing.
Okay, we have two more questions, and that will be it. Kasia was first, so please, it's your turn.
Apart from saying I feel you, I also wanted to notice that a lot of what you were saying about how that book came into being reminds me of commentaries by female authors, military hospital nurses after the First World War. They literally said, I didn't have a plot. I just wanted to talk about every day because every day was crazy enough and scary enough. So these are narratives of trauma, however much we want to avoid saying that in the context of motherhood, really. But apart from that, I wanted to ask you about a writer's hell and heaven. As in, are you anxious about your literary afterlife? Do you argue with critics? Do you read reviews and write back? And do you care, or is it a here and now that matters?
I do read the reviews. I do. Do I care? Less and less as I get older. But you see, they do have power over your life, and how your career will go. And I have noticed a huge change in how I've been received now in terms of how seriously I'm taken. And I think that is largely to do with Irish women writers suddenly dominating the world of both American and UK publishing. London and New York are the centers of English publishing. And okay, I delivered Devil I Know in 2012, and Irish women writers were not particularly cool then. And then there was just like a gunfire sequence of Irish. First up was Emer McBride. She won the Women's Prize. She won a few prizes. Okay, now I'm in Babyland. I can't really remember what's happening, but Emer McBride was first. Then Anna Burns won the Booker for Milkman. Mm-hmm. Sally Rooney blew the lid off. Like, Sally Rooney is an international, once in a 20 years phenomenon. And Claire Keegan. So suddenly Irish women writers are paid attention to, you know. So, and then I publish my book this year and I get attention like I have never received before. If I'm honest, I don't think Soldier Sailor is better written than the others. I think that Irish female fiction just was interest before 2012, and now it is. So do I read my reviews? Yes. Do I care about them? I care, but
do you care about your afterlife? Like, do you want your narrative to be there as, you know, as the story of you as a writer?
Well, I'll tell you, Soldier Sailor is a mother talking to her young child, explaining to her young child what was going on when her child was too young to make memories. So that was important to me as a human being who has given birth to another human being who will go forth in this world and hopefully outlive me. Though my friend's child died, hopefully my child will outlive me. And I wrote on the book to him, the dedication is, when I am gone, you will find me here. Because that was very personal book, you know. So I care about him knowing. I care about a legacy with the people closest to me. After that, well, it's just
so be it.
Okay, and thank you very much. And the final question from one of my master students, coming back to the beginning of the discussion about being a writer, I wanted to ask you how you deal with the writer's block.
Oh, you just have to sit there. And I'm not dealing with it very well now because I'm so busy again, back to motherhood. Just there's so much stuff, especially around Christmas. But you just have to sit there. I remember when I was writing all summer, getting lost, and I remember getting you mentioned, I actually have two favorite books. The presentation you gave, Lolita by Nabokov is one, and Athena by Banville is the other. And yes, I still feel they're my favorite books, even though I discovered them in my teens. But I've read them a lot subsequently and they stand up. But I think it was Athena I picked up and I just scrolled through it randomly and read a few paragraphs and then I was off again. You know, so if you can find the touchstones that guide you, find them now when you're young, they will continue to guide you. And that was how I got through difficult things, because it reminded me of why I'm doing this, because of love.
Okay, thank you very much. With this, with these really important words, let us conclude this meeting. To all of you, but especially to Claire, I would like to pass on best wishes from the Irish Embassy here in Poland, and especially from His Excellency the Ambassador Patrick Howie, who authorized me to pass on the greetings. And once again, thank you all for participating participating. Thank you, Claire, for agreeing to be here with us. And I do hope that our students will use that knowledge and your thoughts in their future reading and writing, and will not be discouraged by the initial difficulties of both. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And
you.
I do remember being a first year and getting the reading list and nearly vomiting. So it was so extensive, but I got through it, and it has been a resource for my whole life. So read as much as you can.
Yes. So there you go. Read as much as you can. Thank you very, very much. Yes.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.